You know, people say they've hit rock bottom like it's the end of the story. But what if it isn't? What if it's the start of something deeper, something far more profound? There's a strange clarity that emerges when you have nothing left to lose. When the people you thought would always be there are gone. When the plans you clung to have crumbled. When the identity you wore no longer fits. That's when you're stripped of all illusions and you're left standing face to face with reality. It's painful, yes, brutally so, but it's also honest. See, when you've lost everything, the masks fall away. You stop pretending. You stop lying to yourself about what matters. The noise of the world gets quieter because the chaos within has taken over. But in that silence, in that aching, empty silence, there's a flicker of something new, a whisper, a spark. It says, "You're still here." And that matters, because if you're still here, then there's still something left to fight for, something worth building. People think vision is some grand idea, something you come up with on a whiteboard in a coffee shop. It's not. Real vision comes when you've seen the dark, when you've lived in it, when you've begged for a way out and there wasn't one. And somehow you kept going anyway. That's where it starts. That's when the vague ambitions get replaced by something clear and sharp, a purpose that cuts through the fog. And here's the kicker. No one can give that to you, not your parents, not your teachers, not your friends. It has to be born out of you through pain, through surrender, through the moment you finally say, "I can't keep living like this." That's when things shift. That's when you start asking different questions. Not, "How can I be successful?" but, "What truly matters to me?" Not, "How do I make people love me again?" but, "How do I learn to respect myself even when no one else does?" It's only when everything is taken away that you begin to understand what's essential. The comforts are gone, the routines are broken, the relationships are shattered, and what's left is the truth. Your truth, raw, uncomfortable, and unfiltered. And that is where transformation begins. Because from there, you're not building a life to impress anyone. You're not chasing validation. You're constructing something solid, something meaningful, something that belongs to you. And you become dangerous in the best way possible because you've been broken. But you didn't stay broken. You've been overlooked, but you stopped waiting to be chosen. You've been humiliated, but you learned to walk with your head high anyway. That kind of resilience, that kind of courage, doesn't come from books or podcasts or social media quotes. It comes from standing in the ashes of what used to be your life and daring to believe that something new can rise from it. You don't have to be fearless to do this. You just have to be willing. Willing to let go of the life you thought you needed in order to step into the one you were meant to build. Willing to walk alone if you must. Willing to begin again, this time without pretending. And so, when you find yourself at the bottom, when your chest is tight, and your hands are trembling, and there seems to be no one left to call, remember this. That place, that moment, might just be the beginning, not of who you were, but of who you're meant to become. Because sometimes it takes losing everything to realize you already had what you needed inside you all along. You're not done, you're just getting started. There's something you begin to notice once you've lost everything you used to lean on, and it doesn't happen right away. It creeps in, it's subtle at first. You start to realize how much of your life was a performance. How many of your choices weren't really your choices at all, but decisions made to keep the peace, to fit in, to be liked. It's a painful thing to confront, the realization that the life you were living wasn't actually yours. And we don't do this because we're bad people. We do it because we're scared. Scared to be rejected, scared to be misunderstood, scared that if people really saw us, they'd walk away. So we build masks, we play roles, we become experts at blending in, at becoming who we think we need to be for approval, affection, or security. We do what's expected, we follow the script, but somewhere along the way we lose ourselves. And then one day, often through loss, whether it's a job, a relationship, a dream, or even your own mental health, the illusion shatters. You're left alone, just you, no audience, no applause, no more pretending, and for the first time you're forced to sit with yourself, with the truth you've been avoiding for years, that maybe you weren't happy, that maybe the success you chased wasn't even fulfilling, that maybe, deep down, you knew all along that something was off, but you were too tired or too afraid to face it, until you had no other choice. It's one of the most brutal, liberating things a person can go through. Because now, in the wreckage, the lies fall away. The ones you told others, and the ones you told yourself. The stories like, "I'm fine," or "this is what I want," or "I can't do any better," they all come crumbling down, and you realize how much of your identity was built on sand, on fear, on image, on other people's expectations. And that's where the real work begins, because now you're in a position to rebuild from a place of truth. Not comfort, not convenience, but truth. And truth is not always gentle. It's not always easy to carry. It can isolate you. It can cost you people. It might mean walking away from things that once defined you. But it will always lead you back to yourself. And when you start living from that place, that raw, unfiltered honesty, everything changes. You stop chasing things that don't align with your values. You stop begging to be seen. You stop compromising your integrity for temporary praise. You become dangerous not because you're arrogant, but because you're finally rooted. You're no longer swayed by every wind of opinion. You're no longer waiting for permission to be who you are. And here's the thing, when you live this way, the people around you change too. Some disappear. Some can't handle your growth, your boundaries, your refusal to shrink. That hurts, of course it does. But you come to see that the people who truly belong in your life are the ones who embrace your truth, not your mask. It's a terrifying thing to lose everything, but it's also one of the only ways we ever really find ourselves. You look in the mirror, and for the first time you see someone real. Someone flawed, yes, but someone free. Someone who's no longer living to be chosen, but who's choosing themselves, again and again, and that changes everything. So when you reach that moment, when the lies fall silent, and all that's left is your own heartbeat, listen closely. Because that's your life, finally speaking, and this time you get to answer it with the truth. You don't need to rebuild what broke you. You're here to build what's real. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How we spend so much of our lives trying to fill every corner, every space with noise, with comfort, with people, with distractions. We chase after titles, relationships, entertainment, anything to keep us from feeling the full weight of silence. Because silence, it echoes. Emptiness confronts us with truths that we've buried so deep we forget they were even ours to begin with. But what happens when you lose everything? When the world strips away the job you thought defined you, when the people you trusted vanish the moment you're no longer useful to them, when the plans you built your identity around collapse, what's left? That emptiness feels unbearable at first. It feels like death, not just of a lifestyle or a career or a dream, but of your entire sense of self. You're left staring into a void you don't recognize, wondering who you really are without all the labels you once clung to. And that's terrifying. Most people spend their whole lives avoiding that question. They stay busy, distracted, entertained, anything to avoid sitting alone with their own thoughts. But in that stillness, in the raw, cold quiet of losing everything, something starts to happen. You begin to see what remains. You begin to notice the things that aren't gone, And the strange part is, they were always there. It's just that you never had to look for them before. You start to recognize that your value isn't based on what you produce, that your worth isn't determined by how many people applaud you or how many zeros follow a number in your bank account. You begin to understand that meaning isn't given to you by the world. It's something you build inside, often brick by brick, alone in the dark, when no one is watching. It's in that space where the noise dies down, and the ego finally has nothing left to feed on, that you start to rebuild something real. You stop chasing the illusions. You let go of needing approval, of trying to be impressive. You begin asking deeper questions. What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of life actually matters to me, not to the world? In that emptiness, you begin to hear your own voice. And not the one that mimics what your parents said, or your teachers, or society, but the one that's been quietly waiting underneath all that rubble, whispering who you really are. And now, without the weight of pretense, you can finally listen. Maybe that's the point. Maybe losing everything is what forces you to confront the truth that you were never just your job, or your relationship, or your ambition. Maybe success isn't about climbing some corporate ladder or achieving a dream that was sold to you, but about rediscovering your own inner compass, finally unburdened by the expectations of others. When you're broken down to your foundation, you get to decide what gets rebuilt. And maybe you build something smaller this time, but stronger, more honest, more aligned, something that won't fall so easily the next time the world shifts beneath your feet. Because when you've been emptied, and you've survived it when you've stared into the abyss and not only made it through but emerged with something solid, you carry a kind of strength that can't be faked, and you carry clarity too, clarity about what truly matters, clarity about who you are and what you're not willing to lose again. So don't fear the silence. Don't run from the empty places, because in the end, it's only when everything else is stripped away that you finally see what was real all along. And that, right there, is the beginning of real success, when you've lost everything. When you're down to nothing but your breath and your thoughts, there's no pretense left to hide behind. No masks, no distractions, no illusions of control. At that point, you meet yourself, not the polished version you present to the world, not the self you use to fit in or feel accepted, but the raw, vulnerable, exposed core of who you are when life has stripped away everything else. That place, rock bottom, is not just pain, it's not just defeat, it's the forge where character is hammered out, stroke by stroke. You see, comfort rarely teaches. Comfort whispers sweet nothings in your ear while your potential rots quietly in the corner. You can sit in comfort for years and barely change. It lulls you into mediocrity, makes you forget you're mortal, distracts you from your limits, and softens you just enough so you don't fight when you should. But suffering, real, visceral, existential suffering, it sharpens you. It doesn't give you a choice. Either you rise or you dissolve. And many dissolve, yes, but those who rise do so because they choose, minute by minute, to put one foot in front of the other despite everything. When you're on the floor, devastated by loss, maybe a relationship collapsed, maybe your finances are in ruins, maybe your sense of identity has been torn away, whatever it is, in that moment you discover something primal. You're still breathing. That's where it begins. You realize the world didn't stop. Time didn't wait, and you must move. And it's in that brutal moment that you start constructing something real. Not based on fantasy, not based on what others told you to be, but on what your pain taught you matters. That kind of growth doesn't come from vacations or motivational posters. It comes from nights where you don't sleep because your mind won't shut off. It comes from crying alone and still showing up the next morning. It comes from walking into rooms where no one understands what you're carrying and refusing to let the weight define you. That's what builds a human being who is not only capable, but grounded, resilient, aware. There's something sacred in that, almost spiritual. Because in those depths, you stop pretending. You begin to confront your flaws honestly. Your ego gets crushed, and something more honest rises from the dust. Maybe you realize you've been blaming the world when really, you were afraid of accountability. Maybe you see how your need to be liked stopped you from being real. Maybe you finally admit that fear of failure has dictated your choices for years. And slowly, day by day, you begin to rebuild. Not perfectly, but intentionally, and then one day, something changes. You walk into a room, and you don't need to prove anything. You don't need validation. You don't even need applause, because now you're not operating from insecurity, but from foundation. People around you sense it. They don't know what you've been through, but they feel it in your posture, your tone, your eyes. They respect it, not because you shout louder than them, but because you don't need to. You've been where most are afraid to go, and you came back with clarity. That's what rock bottom gives you. It gives you perspective, humility, strength, and above all, it gives you ownership of your own story. You're no longer a victim of your past. You're the architect of your future. So if you're at your lowest point right now, if everything you depended on has crumbled, don't rush to escape it. Sit in it,